Chapter 9. Dreaming. Aching and sore, Mason clutched his left side of his soon-to-be bruised body with his right hand. It had taken him a lot longer than usual, but Mason strolled slowly up the gravel path to his home. There were no cars on the driveway, which was a good thing, and meant his parents weren't home yet. If his mother had seen him hobble in with a huge grass burn along his chin and a teary-eyed look on his face, walking like he had just returned from World War III, she would have seen red and marched down to the school, creating another huge scene and causing even more embarrassment. As he got close to the house, he could see Pebbles, the long-eared, despondent Gargoyle, staring back at him, sat aloft at the front door on the single-story roof. "I don't know why you're so miserable," Mason said in a gruff voice, looking up. "You didn't have to go to school. You got to stay home." He gingerly slipped his rucksack off his left shoulder, trying hard not to make any sudden movements. Careful not to jerk or twist his side, he placed the bag on the gravel. He winced as he bent down to rummage in his bag for the front door key. It took him an annoying amount of time to find it. He ferreted around, hoping to clasp something that resembled metal. He found his set of keys at last, hiding in an inside zip compartment, and with a click that echoed, he let himself into the house. Kicking off his shoes, he left them where they had landed and refused to bend down again and place them on the rack. He dropped his bag and kicked it over next to a wooden sideboard. After the day of nightmares, Mason was shattered and wanted comfort food, something sweet to give him energy and make him feel better. Ever since his father had been diagnosed with high cholesterol, the house was a junk food free zone, but his mother thought this was slightly unfair on Mason to starve him of the things he liked, just because of his father's condition. So she created a couple of hiding places where she could stash sweets. The first spot was in the vegetable drawer in the fridge, which contained several chocolate bars and cans of fizzy drink. Mason thought it was funny that all the chocolate was his mother's favourite, but this was a great place to hide the contraband confectionery, as his father would never go anywhere near that drawer. Proceeding to the second hiding place, the upper left-hand corner kitchen cupboard, behind an assortment of baking tins and kitchen utensils, Mason grabbed a chair to reach and found just what he wanted, and was pleased at least something was going right today. Right at the back was a pack of 4 pink iced donuts with coloured sprinkles, and 2 jumbo packs of his favourite microwavable popcorn. He opened the door of the microwave, popped in the bag, and set the timer for 2 minutes. While he waited for the ping on the silver appliance, he saw his MP3 player on the kitchen table and started listening to music. Nodding his head to the beat, careful not to move the rest of his body, he thought he heard a loud bang, which appeared to come from upstairs directly above him. Removing one earphone, he concentrated, listening, waiting to see if he heard the noise again, but there was nothing. Something had fallen over in his bedroom, or maybe the thud was the bass coming from his music player. He placed the dangling earphone back into his ear and continued to nod to the rhythm and started to hum. After a good guitar riff from one of his favourite rock songs, he didn't hear the timer chime, but noticed the microwave's countdown display flashing, informing him that his sickly snack was ready. Pouring the whole contents into a large plastic orange cooking bowl, he made his way out of the kitchen and dining room, now listening to another loud track, and went upstairs to his bedroom. Once at the top, he had only taken 2 steps when he thought he heard a door slam, but couldn't tell which direction it came from. From the top of the stairs, he balanced his weight with one hand on the banister, and attempted to peer down to see if perhaps his mum or dad had come home, all the while trying to keep a firm grasp on the bowl of prohibited produce. With the strong smell of popcorn lingering in the air, it was lucky that it wasn't the front door, so his father didn't discover the sugary secret. He pushed off with his supporting hand, took a few steps back. He was about to turn around as an outline of a mysterious figure approached, and a powdery white hand touched his shoulder. With a jolt, the bowl shot up level with his head, but the popcorn carried on travelling up and up until it ricocheted off the ceiling, plummeting back down like stones in a hailstorm. Mason let out a thunderous "Ah!" This was met by an identical but more high-pitched "Ah!" A mass of wild hair and a ghost-like face was in front of him, and with her hands clasped tightly over her ears. Chloe was just as shocked as Mason was, to find herself standing there in the McQueen household. "What are you doing here?" Mason demanded, as he replaced gentle pressure back to his side, almost crying in agony. Her big, misty grey eyes flitted back and forth, observing all she could in such a short space of time. "Oh no, it's happened again," she admitted. "I saw you in school about 2 hours ago, Mason remembered. The whole house was locked up. How did you get in? But Chloe's sense of smell had cancelled out Mason's words and caused her mind to wander. Has that popcorn got sugar on it? Mason looked at his feet and saw the mess of his ruined snack. No, it's got crap from the floor on it, he disappointedly remarked, talking through his teeth. This is terrible. What am I going to do? Chloe dropped to her knees and blubbed, her sad eyes full of water. Mason thought she was overreacting. It's okay, there's another bag in the cupboard, he consoled her. But Chloe just cried even more. Reluctant but compelled, he braced himself and bent down to his oldest friend's level, riding through the pain in his side, and put his arm around her. He had, after all, told Chloe that she could come and talk to him whenever she needed. When most of Chloe's tears had subsided, and she had regained the ability to talk clearly, she revealed to Mason her most closely guarded secret. I think I'm sleepwalking, blanking out or losing my mind. And then she announced, Mason, I think I'm going crazy. One nuked bag of popcorn later, Mason and Chloe were in his room, stuffing the popcorn kernels into their mouths. Chloe was sat at the foot of Mason's bed, covering herself with a dark blue throw blanket that Mason used in the winter months if he got cold, while he sat gently swaying side to side on his swivel desk chair on the opposite side of the room. On a happier note, the big event was less than 24 hours away, and Mason inquired whether Chloe was going to be present at the twins' birthday bash. I have to put up with Hunter teasing me at school, she admitted. There's no way I'm letting him mock me in my free time. Come on, Chloe. Mason tried to perk up her spirits. It's Blaine's party too. He would like you to come and celebrate with us. Now she was less emotional, Mason asked, Okay, how did you get in here? Chloe composed herself and recalled she was in the food technology class, her last lesson of the day. She was rolling out pastry, making a jam tart, when Mrs. Frost stopped the class and gave the pupils a demonstration on how to properly knead dough and informed them all that yeast is a living microorganism. Chloe began to yawn. Deprived of sleep, Chloe's head felt like a lead weight, and she only rested it on the table for what she thought was a second, and when she lifted it back up after hearing what sounded like Mr. Tyler threatening someone, the class had finished. All the students, even the teacher, had vanished, and no one had bothered to wake her up. Peeling her pastry crust from her face, leaving a coat of flour behind, she collected her belongings together. She wanted to get home before her mother came looking for her. As she approached to go down the stairs, she heard Hunter talking about Headcase Harrington to Miss Cockleton in the art room, and listened intently while she sourced the last strawberry sweet from her bag. Fearing that she would be discovered after the conversation had ended, she retreated back into the classroom and decided to wait until Hunter had left the building, but she believed he had spotted her and was making his way into the classroom, presumably to negative comment on her appearance or useless cooking skills, which were evidently still squished by her head on the table. She then ran into the food supply cupboard, where the door closed behind her. Panicking, she grasped in the darkness, trying to locate the handle, but tripped over a box and landed with a thump. Tinsel and baubles spilled out all over the floor, and when she got back to her feet and found the door handle, to her surprise, was in fact now a knob, and when she twisted it, the door opened, and she found herself at the top of the second set of stairs, leading to Mason's attic. It all started about a month ago. My parents think I'm acting up, sneaking out of my bedroom window to get attention, Chloe informed. But they were baffled the one night they locked my window and door, and I still escaped. Mason was still bewildered. How had Chloe managed to get inside his house when all the entrances were firmly secured? She told him that she had woken up once locked in her school locker, and he couldn't figure out how that was even possible. Trying to look on the positive side, Chloe suggested, Perhaps it's just a phase. Teen angst. Maybe I'll grow out of it. Chloe, you're pulling off the best magic trick in the business, Mason said, stunned. Even Houdini couldn't figure out your escape act. Chloe's mood sunk again. Her head dropped, and her long locks of hair swamped her face. You're right, Mason. It's hopeless. No, I'm hopeless. Now sitting with her knees on the bed, she threw the blanket over her head, in a vain effort to make herself invisible from the world. I just want to crawl inside a dark cupboard and stay there, she said with absolute certainty. What happened next, neither of them were prepared for. As Mason sat watching the blue person-shaped mound on his bed, wondering how to best comfort her, the heap under the blanket started to sink, and then with what sounded like a large bird of prey ready to take flight, there was a peculiar flap flap noise, and all of a sudden the overblanket fell flat against the bedsheets. Mason had to rub his eyes in disbelief, as it appeared that Chloe had fallen right through the mattress. Shocked, Mason was about to drop from his swivel chair, get on his hands and knees, and glance under his bed to find her. But before he could, with another flap flap flutter, the door to his oversized, grand wooden wardrobe burst open, and Chloe tumbled out in a backwards roll, like a human Catherine wheel. Sprawled out on her back on the hard floor in Mason's room, she just lay there, staring up at the lampshade and white ceiling, waiting for her surroundings to stop spinning. Mason's dumbfounded face came into view and was almost touching hers. "How on earth did you do that?" Mason said, amazed. "One minute you were there, and then you came crashing out over here." Chloe steadied herself and sat upright. "I must have blanked out again. I didn't do anything bad, did I?" She came to the conclusion that she had been dreading all along, that maybe an evil alter ego was controlling her and taking over her body while she slept. "No, no," Mason reassured her. "Okay, Chloe, this may sound completely crazy, but hear me out. I think you may have just teleported." Chloe gave him a puzzled look, and the first thing that came to her mind was when Mason received that graze on his chin, he must have been concussed as well. With the wonderful notion of teleportation in his head, he tried to make sense of all the information Chloe had provided. "So okay, you go to bed, fall asleep, and wake up in a strange place," he said, waiting for her to acknowledge him with a nod. "But not when you're napping in class. But you still ended up in different places when you were in the closet and under my blanket." Pausing for a few seconds, he grinned, realizing the seemingly obvious. "You can only teleport when you're in the dark," he deduced. Having heard enough of this nonsense, Chloe decided that Mason was now ridiculing her, and rose to her feet to leave, but Mason's mind was working overtime, and she was about to march off when his words, in a mad kind of way, made complete sense. "You wanted to crawl into a dark cupboard, and then you ended up in the nearest thing to it. My wardrobe," Mason said, pointing to the item of furniture. "Perhaps the reason you wake up in bizarre places is because when you're asleep, you can't help where or what you dream about." Chloe was still looking frightened, while Mason was unbelievably excited. "Just think," he explained. "You might be able to travel anywhere in the world you want. No planes, trains, or tiring bus journeys. You could just go and see any concert you wanted." Lost in her spiral of sadness, she suddenly envisioned the possibilities. 3 holidays abroad, shopping in New York on a Saturday morning, and then back in time for tea. She could go anywhere she wanted. All she had to do was just want it badly enough, and the possibility to escape from her parents complaining and the bullies at school. She felt like a brand new person, with a brand new outlook on life. She positioned herself in front of the giant wardrobe, leaving enough space for a small run-up. She took a deep breath and turned her head to Mason. "I'm ready. Let's do this." Crossing fingers on both his hands, he reassured her that he believed in her, and then proceeded to hold the door wedged between his palms. "Go," he whispered in a hopeful voice. With the destination of her favourite teen idol, a loud declaration filled the 15-year-old's bedroom. "I'm going to Ned Copeland's house," she announced with her index finger, pointed directly towards the darkness inside the back of the furniture, and off she charged into the wardrobe. And where a crash should have occurred, there was a flapping noise, and Mason quickly stepped inside to see his friend had vanished. An almighty thud echoed from above his head, followed by a bang and a whiny, high-pitched "Ow!" The door to the attic could be heard swinging open, and then closing with a creak, and after the sound of a few footsteps, Chloe re-entered the room with her right hand rubbing her forehead. "It didn't work," she moaned, nursing a bump to the head. "Why not?" Mason was thrilled that his fundamental assessment was correct, and began speculating that maybe she didn't desire to go there badly enough, or she had to at least know what the place looked like where she wanted to travel to. Or maybe Chloe just had a thing for attics. "Then it's settled," she said, getting back ready into teleportation position and trying to cover all the basic requirements. "I really, really badly want to go to Ned Copeland's attic," she demanded. With the same run-up, she launched herself into the darkness, and with a flap flap, she once again disappeared. Mason waited. There was nothing. "She did it," he yelled. "She did it!" He carefully punched the air in triumph, but the celebration was cut short as a familiar thud rebounded from the attic, and then came an annoyed, "Damn it!" as Chloe had hit her head on the exact same wooden beam as before. "Maximum mileage!" he supposed as he bolted out of the room onto the hallway landing and turned into the spare room. This room was cream with a sage green feature wall, roughly the same shape and size as Mason's, but appeared a lot larger without the monster-sized wardrobe. Attempting not to disturb too much of his mum's research papers, he moved shoeboxes filled with photographs, and underneath a mountain of clean washing on the bed, he found what he was searching for, along with the family laptop. He was currently banned from the computer. His mother didn't want him using it, just in case he accidentally deleted her files while she was undergoing important historic examinations, but knew she was just going to end up rereading the same information, coming to the same unanswered questions, and spend the rest of the day probably playing solitaire. He grabbed the drawing and retraced his steps back into his bedroom. Thinking both of them had either lost the plot or she had fallen asleep on Mason's bed and was dreaming, Chloe decided to let Mason explain his theory. Unfolding the white piece of paper once and then again, he laid it flat on the floor, reached up to grab a red marker from a pen pot on his desk, and asked Chloe to point to the strange places she had woken up. The first red cross was positioned at the bottom to the left. This was the McQueen's house. Then, in the very middle, this was the school. After further buildings were highlighted east of the school, Mrs. Grace's shed, and then northeast of that location was the underpass. Mason's eyes were drawn to one house that stood alone right in the very centre of the confusion, and this was the Draper home. Using a ruler, he drew a line from Chloe's house to the different crosses, then he drew another line from the school down to his house, and came to a startling realization. All the lines he had drawn with a ruler were almost the same length. Measuring the distance between the points, he was able to make out the distance Chloe travelled never exceeded 4.8 kilometres. "This is amazing," Mason beamed. "You teleport through the darkness. You shadowport." Expecting Chloe to mirror his expression, he was taken aback when she wrinkled her nose. "Hold on, it's my power, so I get to name it." Rolling her eyes, thinking of a catchy name, she proclaimed, "I know, I use the dark door. No, wait, Gloomgate." "That's terrible," Mason ribbed. "Shadowport sounds way cooler." Chloe looked at him in a huff. "Then get your own ability." But a luckless, jealous Mason said quietly underneath his breath, "You can't really call howling in your sleep like a dog a power." Delving into the factors and limitations of Chloe's abnormal new gift, there was one question silently consuming Mason's thoughts. "So Chloe," he began, "I can understand you having a dream about school and ending up in your locker, but you've wound up in my attic more times than anywhere else. Does this mean you've been dreaming about me?" Blood raced to her face, and she suddenly felt really hot. She stumbled for words. "In your dreams, perhaps," she blurted out. Hoping Mason hadn't figured out her feelings for him, she quickly changed the topic of conversation to something that would distract Mason. "Brian Headcase Harrington really did exist," she stated as a matter of fact, and shared the scandal with her secret crush. As she retold the entire story, not leaving any detail out, she watched as Mason's mouth fell open, astonished when he was told about how Brian Harrington would argue with himself and make dog-like sounds, scaring animals. His heart sank with total, complete fear, as he noticed obvious behaviour similarities between him and the once fictitious caretaker. Mason often spoke to himself, which he considered normal, and had the occasional one-sided chat with Pebbles the Gargoyle in the morning and afternoon. There was still no answer on the subject of the missing cats, and who or what was responsible, but he couldn't shake the nagging fear that now plagued his thoughts. What if what happened to Headcase Harrington was going to happen to him?